The next step of the Tee Higgins saga has finally arrived, but a lot of Bengals fans remain extremely uneasy about the whole situation. So in this video, I'll explain when we can finally expect a conclusion to all of this. Hi again, Bengals fans. John Sheeran of A to Z Sports Cincinnati here, and we're not breaking any news here, but the Bengals have placed the second franchise tag on Tee Higgins. And I could have recorded that statement anytime within the last 2 weeks because this was always going to be the next step in the process. And despite the confirmation that Higgins is not going to be a part of the free agency market and he is going to be locked in at least for another year for Cincinnati as of right now, I still think that this news annoys a lot of Bengals fans because everybody just wants a deal to get done. The Bengals surely want a deal to get done. Higgins wants a deal to get done. The fans, you guys, want a deal to get done. But that doesn't happen unless both sides have no choice but to come together at the negotiating table. And if we're operating under the assumption that the Bengals were already there based off of the words that Duke Tobin used last week at the NFL Scouting Combine, then the conclusion we can make is that Higgins' camp wasn't quite there yet because they still had the possibility of entering free agency in their back pocket. That was the last piece of leverage that Higgins' camp could have used against the Bengals, the idea that they could talk to other teams and raise the price up even more. The Bengals' last piece of leverage, however, was using the tag on him again, because now he can only negotiate with them. So now we're here where both sides have to talk to each other about reaching a long-term extension because, again, that's not going to be possible for T anywhere else. And that's why the tag ultimately had to happen. It's the only way that you can lock in these talks accelerating to a point where something proactive can actually happen. So what are we looking at in terms of a timeline here? I think the goal is to get this done before the beginning of free agency. I'm not talking about the beginning of actual free agency. I'm talking about the beginning of legal tampering, which is next Monday afternoon at noon Eastern. And the reason for doing that is because right now, Tee Higgins has the second largest cap hit on the Bengals roster at $26.2 million. But they can't touch that cap hit right now if they don't sign him to a long-term deal. So for the Bengals, who still plan on being active in free agency, their full intent is to lowering that cap hit for Tee Higgins this season while also obviously giving him the long-term security that both sides want. And something we didn't talk about a couple weeks ago when we talked about Higgins getting tagged is when other players do sign extensions after they receive the franchise tag. Going off of last year when there were 7 players who got the tag and then got new contracts, this is not including Tee Higgins, who was the 8th guy who had to watch all this stuff happen. 4 players got new contracts within the first week after getting tagged. One of them was traded in Brian Burns, but you're talking about Jalen Johnson of the Chicago Bears, Nnamdi Madubuike of the Baltimore Ravens, and Michael Pittman of the Indianapolis Colts all signed long-term deals with their respective teams before free agency began. That's the formula. That's the path the Bengals want to take. They want to make sure that Tee Higgins' contract is locked in, it's in place, and that their whole cap situation is settled before they start spending in free agencies. Because that's new money, that's new dollars that go onto the cap, and they have to be mindful of that. And doing so without having a $26.2 million albatross just staring at them in the face, that's preferable. Now, obviously, getting a deal done within the next week is not set in stone. There are some examples where it takes a little bit longer than that. For example, Antoine Winfield Jr. didn't sign his deal until May last year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after he was tagged. But again, that's not what the Bengals want to do here. The longer that this drags out, the more it looks like last year's situation where there was no communication on both sides and Higgins ended up missing out on a lot of offseason workouts. He eventually did return to training camp, but I think if July rolls around and there's still not a deal there for Higgins, I doubt he's going to be participating in training camp and putting his body on the line. And there are zero, and I repeat, zero excuses for it to drag on that long. There are really no excuses for this whole thing to extend beyond the month of March. The market for Tee Higgins is extremely clear. We predicted on the show that he would sign a deal between $28 and $29 million per year. Now, T may have thought he could have gotten more than that on the open market, and maybe the Bengals started negotiations at the $26 million per year mark, which is what the franchise tag is, just meet in the middle. There's been so much time to discuss this. There's a clear framework based off of what other high-end wide receiver 2 or low-end wide receiver 1s have been making over the past couple of years. There's so much to get this done. Just get it done within the next week. Because there are 2 very simple facts that are driving this entire thing. Fact number 1, the Bengals wanted this. Fact number 2, Tee Higgins wanted this. And now, both sides are here, and they're not going anywhere. Work it out. Get it done.